to be a little different from other episodes that I've done, and that there's not really a guest. I will have my producer Eddie with me today, and we're going to talk about a guest that I wanted to have on the show, and he declined. Johnathan Van Ness from Queer Eye. And we're going to talk about the conversation that we had and how that went down. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I always say, as I enjoy and Eddie enjoyed doing it. So without further ado, it's me and Eddie.
This is the Powers Project.
这是台湾的 Powers 计划。
日本から The Powers Project.
Aus Deutschland das Powers Project.
Dall'Italia il progetto Powers.
Powers Project. Powers Project.
Okay, and we're here today to witness
the
the
death
joining,
of the Power
either the emergence or the death of the Powers Project. We will see. Hello, boys and girls. Here we are today with my new producer Eddie, and we're gonna talk about a gentleman by the name of Johnathan Van Ness from the show Queer Eye, and so we don't have a guest, so to speak.
I'm a guest.
You're a guest.
Yeah, I'm a guest.
But you're also part of the show. So
Well, instead of being a resident, I'm a guest today.
yes, exactly. So Johnathan Van Ness was somebody who I would have enjoyed having on the show.
Likewise.
He chose to decline, and we'll get into exactly why that was. I do want to say from the get-go, though, this episode I'm excited about because this particular episode is going to exemplify what this podcast is all about, and I'll explain how. When I first thought about doing this podcast, I knew that Johnathan Van Ness was one of the first people who I wanted to have on the show. And the reason is because the Powers Project is about seeing things from different perspectives, challenging our beliefs, challenging our knowledge, and the things that we think that we know. And I thought, who better to start with than myself?
And then the loud and excited Johnathan Van Ness.
Right. So, well, the reason is because I was like, all right, let's challenge something that I have an opinion about, and let's go with that. And so I was watching Queer Eye one night, and I go, I really don't care for Johnathan Van Ness on this show. I like the show, I just don't care for his personality or his character. And so I thought that's something I could talk about. That's something I could go challenge myself with and go, why don't I like him? Why don't I like that personality? What is it about him that makes me go, I'm not a big fan of his. And so I knew then that I thought if I'm going to put it out there for everybody else to challenge their beliefs, to challenge their knowledge, I need to do that myself. And I need to lead the way and show, that I'm just as like everyone else. I need to continually challenge my beliefs and knowledge as well. And I thought, what a great episode this would make if I could get Johnathan Van Ness on my show to do just that, to talk about why I didn't care for him.
Now, were you coming at it in the aspect like, I don't care for him, I don't like that I don't care for him, or were you just like, why don't I not care for him?
Right. It was more like why. I really wanted to explore that because obviously I don't know the guy. Obviously he's never done anything to me.
Right.
So I wanted to go, I wanted to look within myself and go, why don't I like him? Mm-hmm. So I reached out to Johnathan on Instagram, and lo and behold, to my amazement, he actually answered me. Of course, it wasn't the answer I was looking for. However, he did answer me. So, credit to him for answering his own messages. I think that's...
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't get lost in the sea of Instagram messages? Because how many followers does he have on his profile?
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm sure he's relatively famous, and I'm sure he has a ton of fans, and so you're right, for him to see it and not get lost.
It must have just stars aligned for him to find.
Well, I have a feeling that what I said in there probably had a little something to do with him answering. And so what I'm going to do is that on my Instagram under Kurt Powers, I'm going to put the full conversation I had or messages that we had while I was chatting with him on Instagram, and so that people can see what fully took place. And so I think maybe that might be a good place to start. You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
So this is what the message I wrote to Johnathan, and I know people are going to sit there and go, well, I wouldn't have written back to you either, or I would have said no too.
I would have ripped your head off.
Right, exactly. And again, I said I completely understand that, because had someone written that way to me, I'm not sure how I would react. I think I'd know. I think I would sit there and go, oh, well, let me find out what this guy's problem is.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe I would have reacted in the same way. So again,
thinking about it coming from your side, you have this whole Powers project lined
Right.
up, right? So you're developing your mindset to not be accusatory, and you always have your guard up. Where when you're more open and blunt with people, and they're not expecting it, because society is so like, I don't want to step on your toes, you don't want to step on mine, I'm going to be overly cautious, overly polite.
Right.
Just as like a courtesy. And I think when you were so candid with him over messaging, he just wasn't expecting it, and
Well, and I think he reacted. I don't think he took time to think about it and to and then reply. I think he just reacted, because honestly, he did message me back pretty quick, so that was another thing. And I do want to, you bring up a good point, is that when I messaged him, I didn't want to say, hey, I'm a big fan of yours. I didn't want to trick him into coming on the show under the guise of, oh, I'm a fan of yours. I wanted to be bluntly honest with him and not hurtful. I just wanted to be honest so he would know where I was coming from, and that he would know what I wanted to do with the show and why I wanted to have him on. So let me just read this real quick, and then we'll go from there. And if you want, we can break it down as you see fit and ask questions as why I did this or that. So
yeah, sure.
I said, hi, Johnathan. My name is Kurt, and I'm the host of a brand new podcast called The Powers Project. The purpose of the podcast is to get people to constantly challenge their beliefs and knowledge, and to look at things from different perspectives. So I thought I would start with myself. You see, while I like to show Queer Eye, I did not care for you. Now, I could probably reworded that one a little bit differently.
Right.
Okay.
Even when we opened up and you said I didn't care for
Right.
him, I was like,
yeah.
okay.
So, and then that's on me. And again, if someone said that to me, I may have responded in the same way. So, I don't know, and let me continue. I said, I don't know if it's because of you or me or a combination of the two. Either way, I would love to have you on the show to explore this further and show that by challenging ourselves, we can change our reality. I have a psychologist that I could have join us on the show if you'd like to maybe help explain why I have an aversion to someone I don't even know. I admit right there, I don't know this guy, and I have an aversion to him, and I want to find out why. Let's see where I was. And I said, I want to help change the way people think, and I can think of no one better to start with than myself. If you have any questions, please message me or feel free to call me, and I gave you my information. I said, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for your time and consideration, Kurt. Now, while I did say the one thing in there that I didn't care for him, I made my intent perfectly clear that this is on. I want to see, I want to start with me and changing my reality by looking at this from a different perspective and as to why, and answering that question. So let's see here. So Johnathan responded back.
So before we go into the response, having the response that you have, and getting the result that came from your message, reflecting on it, do you see any other things that you maybe should have done? Have you reworded it in your head? Have you had hindsight over it?
I think that I was very clear on everything with the exception of, and again, I could have said it differently than I didn't care for you. I probably could have reworded that differently. Everything else in there, though, I think I did properly. I think I was letting him know I'm putting this on me. I want to change my perspective. I want to know why I feel this way. And I think him being on the show would have helped with that. Because I'm sure that if I got to know Johnathan, that I would find him to be a lovely person, you know. And so I wanted to know what was it about him that I didn't like, and that was the process I wanted to go through.
Sure.
So again, he wasn't very open to it, and again, I'm sure it had to do with everything with the fact that I said I didn't care for him. So, and again, I will say this a million times, that's to be expected.
Well, also coming from his side, how many messages do you think he gets a day? You know,
well, we're
calling
gonna
him names, you know?
So we're gonna touch on that because he actually says something about that, and we're going to address that as well.
Sure.
So he said. So his reply was, "We don't need a podcast for that, honey." Now, you and I both know that whenever someone calls you honey or does the whole Southern thing, that's a.
Well, that's his brand, right? He's always like, honey.
Right,
or,
yeah.
All you beautiful people, you know, that's just the way he talks. It's
Yeah. Well, we also know that gay people use that whenever they're being disparaging.
Yeah. Good choice of words.
Yeah. So he said, we don't need a podcast for that, honey. You have internalized homophobia. It's pretty easy. XX, good luck on your new podcast. And so I was like, wow, that was not quite the response I was expecting, because he made an assumption there that without knowing the first thing about me, he automatically had diagnosed the problem, apparently.
Sure.
So I said, I don't. I wish I could have spoken to you because it's challenging to add inflection and a message and to say everything you want to say with limited amount of characters. I know it may have come off sounding way more harsh than I wanted because that wasn't my intent. I apologize if that's the way it came off. I'm gay, but beyond that, I have always stuck up for guys who are more feminine from those who want to put them down, who consider themselves butch. I said, so it's not as simple as saying I have internalized homophobia because that's not true. I understand if you're not interested. I just thought it might be something you would like to help explore and help others who may feel the same. So again, I think I'm being pretty clear with my intent here. And again, I think intent is everything. If I had intended to insult this man, if I intended to, berate him, I wouldn't have apologized. I wouldn't have explained myself to say, hey, if this came across harsh, I didn't mean for it to, and and I'm basically saying I take responsibility if it came across that way. I just have, I find it very challenging when you can't really add inflection and you only have a limited amount of characters to say what you want to say, to get your message across, in the way that you want to. And again, I thought I did the best job that I could, and while being honest with him.
Right.
And I thought that it was more important to be honest with him than to sit there and kiss his ass and tell him that I just thought he's the greatest thing since sliced bread or something.
Well, then you probably wouldn't have got a reply, right?
Probably not. Yeah. So, he'd probably go, oh, just an unadoring fan. Yeah. Right. So anyway, he messaged me back again. He said, 1, not interested. 2, the reason you like Queer Eye, but you don't like me is 100% without a doubt your internalized belief that my personality is too gay or too femme for your liking, which is internalized homophobia. A lot of gay men struggle with it. It's not unique, and you're the 100,000th this year person who has told me they don't like me on the show. So before I go any further, all right, so here's the thing. I'm sure that number was an exaggeration to make a point.
Maybe not. Who knows?
Maybe not. Maybe he did have 100,000 people. Here's the thing, though. He automatically dismisses, what I feel by accusing me of having internalized homophobia, and all 100,000 people who don't like him, who tell him every year they don't like him, that that they have internalized homophobia or that they're homophobes, one of the two. And so he dismissively, just basically writes me off and what my feelings are, and everybody else who doesn't agree with him or doesn't like him. Never once looking at himself going, if I have 100, because I'll tell you right now, if 100,000 people didn't like me, I would at least go, why don't they like me? And I would look at myself and go, is there something I'm doing that, would cause people not to like me? Now, I may be just speaking the truth, and maybe that's what he feels. Maybe he's speaking the truth, and he feels these people don't like me because I'm, truth to power or whatever.
Right.
I don't think he went through that process. And again, this is my opinion. Everything that I'm telling you today is my opinion. There's, I have no facts behind this other than what what my intent is and what I said.
This is just an experience.
Right, exactly.
This is what it is.
Right. So he goes on to say, I'm more than who you judge me for on Queer Eye. I am an author. I'm an HIV plus positive advocate. I help people every single day of my life. Good luck to you and your podcast. And this is where he goes on a little, bragging spree here, where he goes, and again, it's sort of like a backhanded, like, oh, good luck, but look what I've done, sort of thing, and he said, I'm on my 117th episode of mine where I've covered this very topic, but also genocides, biology, astronomy, engineering, just interviewing Senator Warren. So my hands are full. Big hug, and when you're trying to book guests in the future, never ever come at them how you did me. So, again, I understand his reply.
He gave you a little bit of a help there at the end, though.
Well, the thing is I've never come at another guest like that,
right.
And and I've talked to other famous people, and I've had no issue with them. Mm-hmm. The thing is I've also been honest with them, and so so I said, all right. So I was like, what? Here's the thing. All right, I said, thanks for your advice. I will take it to heart. I just want you to know, Howard, that because you've covered this at length, apparently you feel like you have all the answers and therefore have no need to look at it from a different perspective. While I applaud you for all you do and all you've accomplished, for you to make a general assumption about me is exactly what I'm talking about. I don't feel you're too gay. What I question is whether or not the person you put yourself out there as being, which is so flamboyant, is really you or just an act because straight people love gay people who reinforce the stereotypes that they have of us. So,
and that was the end of the communication? Or?
That was in the communication. So I thought that was the end of it, period. Well, come to find out, I guess after that, he had blocked me. And he went on to post something on his storyline. And what he posted on his storyline was a condensed version of the conversation that we just had. And he...
was it just your side, or was it his side as well?
What he did is he posted the first part of the communication, of the conversation. And then he posted like his response, except that it wasn't really his response, and it was taken out of context. It was almost like he did a clapback, sort of thing. Yeah. And so he didn't give a true full picture of how the conversation went. And then so when he went onto his storyline to post this, of course his fans were upset with me, which, again, I completely understand. Let me see if I find it here. And so what happened was he one of the things about Johnathan is that he professes to be this progressive thinker, this free, this all-loving, all-encompassing person who is completely against bullying. And yet when he went on there to put this on the storyline and blocked me so I couldn't respond to it, basically what he did was he formed this narrative that was false to get his fans to back him up and go, oh, you're wonderful or whatever. Well, then his fans decided to go on my show or on my podcast and give
on
me
your profile.
on the profile, and they decided to give me 1 star, and then say things about me that weren't true. Now, of course, they have no idea that whether it's true or not, because Johnathan had only posted a small part of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was misleading, and so they, his fans are going to believe Jonathan's this loving person and that he wouldn't do something like that. So whatever he posted must be true, and it is. It's just out of context, and he didn't post the whole thing to give people the whole view of what I said. And so they went on and said, and called me things like mean-spirited. They called me a homophobe because they don't know that I'm gay, and they didn't listen to not even a second of one of my episodes, and they just started writing these things about my podcast, which had they even listened to it for even 10 seconds, they would see that I had an episode called The Gay Zone, where I had 2 gay advocates on the show that I praised throughout the show because they were just amazing men who did amazing things for the gay community. But see, those facts don't matter to them because, again, they're reacting.
They're defending
right,
their
they're
family,
exactly.
quote-unquote family. Right.
And so that's how that came about. And I think that, that the honesty that I displayed could have probably been more, I could have been more sensitive. But again, I felt that it was more important to be honest than it was to just, try to get him on the show.
Fluff and stuff.
Right.
Well, and I've said this before, there's a million ways. I mean, you could say hard things to say, right? You can say maybe rude things, but in a certain kind of way where it's actually interpreted the way that you mean, right? Because if you're not trying to be mean or hateful, you can package up your message in a certain kind of language. Because when you talk, and especially when you send messages that are just text-based, you're taking the reader on a journey, and you need to make sure that you're giving them the right emotional cues they need to pick up on what you mean. And when you reached out to Johnathan, I mean, we don't know what his guards are. We don't know what his life is like. We're not, as famous as he is, and there's a lot of stress that comes with that. And if he has had 100,000 people tell him that they don't like him because he's because he's flamboyant or feminine, that puts a guard up because he can't live his life reading that every single day and still function. At least I if I took all that to heart, I wouldn't be able to function because I think, wow, all these people hate me.
Right, and I get that because I'm sure I know for a fact. I mean, to be honest with you, I knew when I started this podcast that I will get people who hate me, who because I'm going to be, speaking about things that go against their beliefs, and I'm going to tell you that people, when it comes to their beliefs, they're diehard, they're zealots when it comes to their beliefs, that they'll do anything to hold on to those beliefs. And I knew that, that's just part of being, out in the public. You're going to have people who are going to sit there and they're going to call you names, or they're going to say things about you they don't know. And, some people just won't know the first thing and don't care. They're just out there to cause trouble. And, of course, those are trolls.
Watch the world burn. Huh?
Right, exactly. I never expected it to start this soon, and with someone like Johnathan Van Ness and his fans. Like, I just, to call me a homophobe and not even realize that I'm actually gay, shows how silly it is that, you start calling names. I mean, I've always noticed it, and I've said this, people who don't have any substance to their argument will always resort to name calling, which is, that's what children do. It's like if they don't like something, they're not going to approach you about what it is they don't like about you. They're just going to call you a name because they can't really justify their position. So,
well, do you feel like he called you a name?
No, his fans did.
His fans did.
No, I think what he did was the worst part, which was to put out this false narrative on his storyline to make me look a particular way and make him look like this victim who stood up to the bully, and that wasn't what happened. Yet that's the way he put it out there, and that's why his fans felt the need, and he made sure my information was out there so they could come to my podcast. So if you're against bullying, why would you why would you pull such a stunt, knowing that your fans are going to come and try to bully me? Now, I can't be bullied because I don't have a victim mentality, and what people say really doesn't bother me. I don't care if everybody on the earth sat there and said, you suck. You know what? If you took the time to tell me I suck, thank you very much for your time.
Well, Kurt, you don't suck, so you're fine.
So, well, thank you. At least one person in this world doesn't think I suck. So what he did wasn't just only disingenuous, it was a form of bullying. And I don't know
whether he meant it that way or not.
Right, and again, he may not even have realized that that's what he did, yet that is exactly what he did. And I don't know that if he went back and looked at it and said, and would think, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and maybe he would. If he didn't, then I would challenge him on, on who he really is and what his beliefs really are, because you can't say you're against bullying and then pull a tactic like that, which is bullying and justifying it.
Right.
So
it's like borderline abuse of power, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's accumulating all this influence and not realizing the scope of it, and still acting the way that you'd act day to day with all these far more powerful impactions to your actions, right? That's not a saying, but it should be maybe.
Yeah.
And just kind of not being aware of what you're doing by being like a layman, like acting the way everyone else acts. You can't do that anymore.
Right.
You have to really analyze your actions, and that's exhausting. Now, I don't think either one of you was right. I don't think either one of you was wrong, because if you sit in the seat of perspective, your story is going to be a lot different than Jonathan's story.
Right, and I think that's important. That's why I don't want anyone who happens to like me, if there's anyone out there, I don't want you being upset with Johnathan, and I don't want you going on Jonathan's podcast and giving 1 stars. I don't want you going on his Instagram and saying anything, because again, this is Jonathan's perspective and my perspective, because as much as I could not put inflection into my message to him, he I know what my inflection was in my head. He may have interpreted it completely. He may have read that and said, "Oh, this guy's an ass,"
because he's putting it through all of his filters,
just
his
like
personal
just
filter.
like when I read his message, I had a certain thought in my head of what his inflection was, and it wasn't nice, and and that may very well be that he was attempting to be nice. And again, I understand that I'm putting my perspective on things, he's putting his perspective on things, and that's what I wanted to talk about. I unfortunately, because he's not on the show, I can't say what did you mean here, because I want you to understand what I meant, and I did the very best by apologizing and saying that wasn't my intent, and letting him know, because again, I'll say this a million times, intent is everything. If I intended to insult you, and even in a nice way, but that was my intent, then it's wrong. But that wasn't. I really wasn't looking to insult him. I was looking to have an honest dialogue with him and letting him know that I was being upfront with him. And then he comes back with, "Oh, well, you have internalized homophobia." Now, here's the issue I have with that, is that I know that, see, again, the reason why I'm not mad at Johnathan is because I understand he's a TV personality. And as such, he plays a character, and yet he puts himself out there as if this is the genuine Johnathan Van Ness. And yet, I have to question, is that who he really is, especially after pulling this bully tactic, or is he just playing a role as this character that that has been carefully crafted and formed for the show Queer Eye? Because of course, we've had 2 different Queer Eyes, since its inception.
Right.
And they always have to have the one flamboyant guy who's more flamboyant than everybody else. Now, there's a couple of things that come to mind here. One is that when I asked everybody that I know, and I said, "Do you remember any of the people from the first Queer Eye?" And without fail, everybody remembered one person. Now, I happen to remember 2 because I thought one guy was really cute, Jay. But everyone else could only name one. And that was Carson Kressley. And The reason Carson Kressley, everyone can remember, because he was the flamboyant one.
Big personality.
He was the
stood
one
out.
who went out and stood out, and he went on to do other things. I wouldn't fault Johnathan Van Ness for going, hey, that's who I'm going to be, because I want to be something more than just this show. And it's worked, because again, who watches the show?
Well, right now, just about everybody has at least seen it at some point.
Okay, let's put it this way. Who doesn't watch the show?
Tell me.
Straight guys. Straight guys have no desire
There's
to watch.
probably a couple.
If their girlfriends or
en masse,
wives make
potentially
them.
not.
Yeah. The truth is that the majority of straight guys don't give a damn about that show and will never watch it unless their wives or girlfriends make them watch it. So you have women and gay guys who are watching the show. So again, it appeals to them. The more flamboyant person appeals to them. It's that whole show.
Well, everyone's going to have a favorite, right? I think that's why they have such a spectrum on the actual team.
See, I don't think it's so much that as that the show does do a good job of showing that there are different types of gay people out there. We're not all, Johnathan Van Ness. We're not all, Anthony.
Right.
We run the spectrum of the very butch guys, or the ones that consider themselves butch, to the very femme guys, and there's plenty of of us in between that spectrum, and so I think they do a good job of putting that out there to show, look, we're not all the same,
and not all gay people are the same.
Right, exactly, and I think that's the point that they're attempting to make.
I don't think that he's acting a certain kind of way in the show. I think that's genuine. Now, some of it's going to come down to production decisions and editing and showing you what they want you to see.
Right.
Right. But as far as him being genuine, I don't think he's ever said, he's the perfect person who's never...
No,
right.
and I don't think he's ever put... And I don't think, I don't think that he would, I do think, however, that, again, when you make certain statements that you're against bullying, you can't sit there and bully.
It conflicts with your brand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, maybe he didn't realize what he did, and maybe if he found out that's what someone said, hey, that was bullying, he might not even agree with it that it was bullying, and yet it really was, because
maybe he doesn't realize it.
Right, and that's very possible. To me, he reacted with the same tactics that other people react when someone says something they don't like, and that is call names and first off, he deceived people by putting this message out there
by paraphrasing your argument,
right, instead making it look a certain way than instead of how it really was. So he used deception. He accused me of being, and having internalized homophobia, and the other tactic that people use, and I don't believe he did that, is that they usually call people names, and so this is all to further their false narrative and say, hey, look at me, this is what happened to me, and and look at me, I'm the hero because I clapped back at this bully or whatever, and so there's this false narrative that he was pushing that just shows that at the very least he was disingenuous in this particular instant. That he just wasn't being honest with anyone. And so if you're putting yourself out there as someone who is, being yourself and being honest with people about who you are and stuff, I think that you need to take more care with the actions that you do.
It's true. Well, this whole experience and this whole exchange is very human, right? You were very human. You weren't super articulate in the sense that you were lamenting over every word you're going to send him. You just sent him a very honest question, and you wanted him to be on the show. And he sent you very human emotions back, right? He read it, interpreted it, responded, sent you a response, and I think the upset comes from you just expected better from him.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And again,
it's like a parent. And so I wanted better from you.
Right, I did, because I guess even though I realize he's a TV personality, I bought into that he is that person, that he wasn't just playing a character. And so you're absolutely right. And so maybe I was wrong. Maybe he is a character. Maybe it's not who he is, but it's a character that he runs with because he can monetize that character. And again, I don't fault him for that because he's, and not only that, he, whatever fame he has, he's obviously done, good things with it. And so that's a plus right there, because there's a lot of people who get famous and don't do anything except
spend it back on themselves.
Right, exactly. And they don't give anything in return. So there's a lot to be said for him about that. But you're right. I expected better from him, I guess. And
probably hurt your feelings. I mean, not in the sense that what he said hurt your feelings, but the fact that he wasn't what you thought he was going to be.
It was disappointing.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Yeah, it was disappointing. So, and there's a thing there's a point I want to address. See, there's this danger of minimizing the power of our words. So what happens is that when you use things like, when you say everybody, the 100,000 people, if you are going to sit there and say all 100,000 of those people are either homophobes or have internalized homophobia, you minimize the power of those words, because then we just start throwing that word out so carelessly and casually that it doesn't have a meaning anymore.
Anyone who disagrees with you has an internalized
right,
homophobia
exactly.
issue.
And so if you take the word fuck, I can remember 30, 40 years ago, no one ever said fuck. Now everybody says fuck. Your grandmother says fuck. Because it no longer has any power because everybody started saying it. And you take a word like pedophile. Pedophile conjures up this worst image that you can imagine. But if everybody started going, oh, you're a pedophile, all of a sudden it would lose its power and it would lose its meaning. And so you can't just start calling people pedophiles because you think it's funny or because you want to minimize somebody's position. So you think, oh, well, I'll just shut them down. I'll call them a pedophile, or I'll call them, a racist. I'll call them a homophobe. We start throwing these names out, and that's what this cancel culture is doing. They're throwing names out there without any facts, without any basis, and they just start calling people names because they want to shut those people down because they have a difference of opinion, because they don't want to debate, whether whose position might be correct or wrong. They just want to shut them down completely. And there's a danger in that because, again, these words lose their power at that point when it becomes so prevalent, and they have no meaning behind them any longer. So
well, that's like what you said with clapbacks. Like, I don't agree with clapbacks. Yeah, they're funny to read if they're something up on the internet for you to look at as a meme or whatever. But it's such a vicious mindset. Someone says something that you disagree with, and the goal is to be as mean as humanly possible in as short a time as possible and to post it for everyone to read, right?
Right. And then people go, and then people react in the most childish way. They're like, damn, it's like, damn, right. Because they think that was a vicious clapback. And again, what happens is, and we find this with, again, so many different groups, whether it's feminists, whether it's gay right activists, whether it's any number, for trans people or whatever. If someone says something, and it doesn't even have to be bad, but it just goes against their narrative, they come back with the most vicious names,
to shut them down.
To shut them down, and that's all it is.
And they get praised for it.
Right, exactly. Right. And that's why when I talk to people and I say, look, when a woman sits there and goes, "Oh, you're mansplaining," all they're doing is attempting to shut your mouth up.
Or just disregarding everything.
Right, exactly, and that's what they want. They want to disregard everything you're saying. Because why? Because I know that men explain things to women that at times should just go, "Hey, you don't know what you're talking about." So let's. But instead of saying, "Oh, you're mansplaining," why don't you address them and shut them up that way? Show them the facts that they don't know what they're talking about. That will shut them up, and that will get people behind you.
Yeah.
However, when you say something like mansplaining, all I know is that you're trying to shut me down because, yes, I do have a point of view, and you don't want to hear my opinion, so you're going to sit there and use a made-up word to shut me down so you don't have to listen to it.
Well, it's a scapegoat, right?
Right.
It makes the person who is the target of seeming like they don't know what's going on, or the target of all this information that maybe they can't process when you're giving it to them. And they use this like eject button from the conversation, and instantly makes the person who's trying to help or trying to have the initial input look ridiculous.
Right.
And the person who in the end would have looked inferior, or maybe as like a student, makes them look like they know exactly what they're talking about, and it just immediately switches roles. And I think that's super toxic, and that's something that we keep creating, like with clapbacks, with mansplaining, and they just keep popping up because everyone wants to be the hero of their own adventure and never have to be accountable for not knowing something, never wanting to grow, because growing hurts. Growing is growing pains. I mean, grow a bone, you're going to be hurting your leg all day. Growing your personality, you have to go through the same uncomfortable situations.
Exactly. And that's why very few people want to challenge their beliefs. That's why they don't want to challenge their perspectives, their reality, their knowledge. They don't want to challenge any of those things, because if they do, if they find that what they believe doesn't hold water any longer, or the knowledge that they have doesn't hold water any longer, that means that if they're either going to have to live in knowing, being willfully ignorant and living in that, knowing that it's not true anymore, or they're going to have to do some soul searching and find out what the truth is and grow, and growing pains. That's what it is. It's mental growing pains.
I think a lot of the reasons that people don't argue, or they run away from conversations like that, is because they have this belief and they don't know why they have it. So when you start to pick at it,
right,
they don't want you to know that they don't have a backbone to it. It's just the way that they
are.
Right,
it's all surface deep.
Right.
That's it.
And they don't want to challenge it because they're told that that's right and that's what they're going to stick to. And if you ask why, they have no response for it.
Right. And you find that with people when it comes to religion. You find it with politics. Whenever I talk to people, and again, I'm not even saying one side is right or the other. I'm just challenging you. Why do you have this belief? What are the facts that you have that make you believe this way? And what it is they don't have facts, because it's something that someone told them, that they respected or whatever, or their parents, or they grew up that way, that they were taught that, and they hold on to these beliefs because it's more comfortable. It's easier to hold on to those beliefs than to challenge them. And that's when I talk, when I've talked about in the first podcast about the 20%ers and the 80%ers. 20%ers are people who are able and willing and wanting to challenge their beliefs, challenge their knowledge, challenge their perspectives at all times, and make sure that the latest and greatest thing out there, whether their belief still holds water or not, and if it doesn't, then if there are facts or truths out there that show that what they believed isn't true any longer, then they're willing to change that.
Yeah.
But there are 80% of people out there who not only are not willing to change it, they're not even willing to challenge it.
Or consider it.
Right, exactly. So, and again, that comes down to why I wanted to have Johnathan on the show anyway, because I wanted to challenge why I, didn't care for Johnathan. Mm-hmm. One of the things that did happen is he was right in the long run. We didn't need to do a show about it, because as I was messaging with him, I realized it wasn't because he's feminine or that he's too feminine that I didn't like him. Because the truth of the matter is that like I said, I've been an advocate for feminine men. I've stood up for feminine men, where these guys who think they're butch, who would unsolicited would go out and say things to them on different apps or whatever, and say, "Oh, you're so feminine. Why aren't you a girl?" or whatever, whatever.
Right.
They're
just hateful
right.
stuff.
And there was no reason to say it. It wasn't like the person had even started a conversation with him, but because of who they were, these guys thought because they went to the gym, 2 hours a day, that they're butch and they had the right to say something to this person. And I challenged those guys and go, "Who the hell do you think you are?"
Right.
If you don't like this person, if they're not your type, then shut the fuck up and leave them alone. There's no reason for you to sit there and try to berate them because they're not your type.
With what's the outcome there that they're hoping for? To
to
bully
build
them into being a different kind of way?
No, I think it's just to build themselves up. To go, look, see, we're so butch, we can attack someone, and you're not going to do shit about it. It's in their, it's this mindset that they have, which is that kind of mind, that kind of I'd say pseudo masculinity is toxic because it's not. That's not what masculinity is. It's their version of it.
What's socially acceptable at the time.
Right, exactly. So I've always been an advocate and always stood up for feminine guys. And secondly, I've only dated feminine guys exclusively. So to sit there and say I have internalized homophobia because I don't like you, Johnathan, because you assume that I think you're too feminine, it wasn't that. What I realized is I coined this phrase, and because I couldn't think of anything else, but I coined the phrase "scene queen," and that's what I see Johnathan as. Again, this is my opinion. Okay.
Well,
and
describe it a little bit.
A scene queen is somebody who feels like they're the star of the show everywhere they go, and they have to
project.
They have to project this persona for everyone to see them, and not everybody needs to see you. I've been out at restaurants where I've seen very feminine guys, and I mean where I've seen guys who wear dresses and
look great doing it.
Right, and I've never had one issue with any of them. What I have an issue with are people who sit there and have to cause a scene to say, look at me, look at me, look at me, and that you always need this attention as if you didn't get enough of it when you were a child or something. And it's like you also have to upstage anybody in your circle. Like you have to, you've got to steal the limelight and be the star of the show. And that's what I realized that I didn't like about Johnathan is my perception that that's what he does and that's who he is. Mm-hmm. Again, this is my opinion. I'm not saying that's what he is. I'm saying to me that's what he is. And he does project this stereotype that straight people have of us. And that makes straight people feel good. Women go, oh, this is someone I could hang out with. This could be my girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And so they love him for that. And I think that's why in both the first Queer Eye and the second Queer Eye, both him and Carson Kressley are the two characters who are able to go off and do other things, such as his own podcast, and starring in videos and movies and stuff like that, because he does put himself out there as the stereotypical gay guy that people think of when they think of gay people. And I think it makes them comfortable to see that. And we've seen that throughout history with not just gay people, but even with people of color. The reason Cosby was so popular is because they could laugh at black people, but put black people in a serious role, and white people didn't want to have anything because they weren't ready for it. It's only until recently, with shows like Empire, that How to Get Away with Murder, where you could see black people in intimate, relationships and kissing and stuff, where white people become okay with it. But it took us 20 years to get there, So, again, seeing gay people that we can laugh at is one thing, but seeing gay people in an intimate relationship where they're kissing, where they're serious and stuff, that's a whole nother thing for straight society to accept. And I think that's why they cling to Johnathan, because he maintains that stereotype for them that they're comfortable with.
And well, if that's the way that he is, it's not fair to say that he is a stereotype. Stereotypes came from somewhere, right?
Right.
So
and
there have to be some people who are just like that.
You're right, there are. And stereotypes, you're right. Stereotypes or generalizations come about because there's some truth into it. Mm-hmm. But I will say this. The stereotypes that straight people have of gay people are from decades ago, because they haven't really gotten to know the gay community as a whole. Because now that more and more people come out as gay, we're finding that they're not the majority of gay men that I know, and in the experiences I have, are not guys who walk around with rainbow Daisy Dukes on and pride flags, in their hair and things of that nature. And they're not all wearing dresses or saying, hey, honey, or hey, girl, or anything. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those, but they don't represent the entire population of gay people in this country or even on this planet. So I think that they're comfortable with it because that's, again, where straight society is right now.
Well, that's what they've seen the most, right? They're comfortable with it because that's what they've been made to be comfortable with, right?
Right.
Just through exposure, just through having it constantly there, constantly reinforced, having, when they're growing up, being told that it's okay to laugh at that, you know.
Well, and that's the thing. And then when you have it reinforced through TV or media even, you know, it's like any news station that ever reports on, you know, on gay pride, they never or it might be like a half a second, but they very seldom show gay people out there who, you know, let's say, are a normal, you know, what we would consider normal dress wear. They're always looking for the most extreme gay guys out there who are dressed as scantily as they can possibly be dressed, and the craziest stuff that they could be dressed in, and that's what they show. So when people are looking at the 6 o'clock news, there's that stereotypical gay guy that we think, you know, that image,
know, like, oh, he's
right,
gay,
right, and that's the image they have implanted into the brain, and it's just continually reinforced. So, and again, Johnathan may very well be that person that he puts himself out there to be. Mm-hmm. And maybe he just, again, didn't think about his actions, you know, because he reacted rather than acted. And, you know, and that's all a possibility. I just think that, from my perspective, that the reason I don't like him is because he is that scene queen who needs that attention, and I don't know where that comes from. As far as, I don't know why
that rubs you the wrong way.
I do. Yeah, but see, here's the thing: it's like if if we take it and let's forget about Johnathan, let's forget about gay people. When I see women out there who are famous, I'm not a fan of people like Paris Hilton. I'm not a fan of people like Kim Kardashian, because these are people who are just like, to me, Johnathan. They have to always be in the limelight. They always have to have the camera on them. They'll do whatever it takes to have the light on them. And I don't care for people like that. I don't care for showboaters. I never have. But then again, you know, I'll sound like a hypocrite because I can sit there and go, but I did like Muhammad Ali. Now, Muhammad Ali could arguably be the biggest showboater of all time, but I think it comes down to intent. I don't think Muhammad Ali's intent was like, look at me because I'm so great, and even though those were his words, I'm the greatest. I think there was another motive behind his act, where I don't think it was just self-serving. With Johnathan and Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian, I think it's all self-serving. It's to build them up and to build up their persona. Again, this is my opinion. Mm-hmm. I don't know that for a fact. And that's why I kind of wish I could have had the show with him and talked about it with a psychologist who could have sat there and go, you know, there's validity to that, or no, you're completely wrong, or whatever. It would have been nice to be able to get through that and see one way or the other. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. But I think that, you know, there still can be some good that comes out of this. And that's why I wanted to do the show with you tonight, is because it's about, you know, this show is about changing our perspectives when we need to. You know, because once we change our perspectives, we change our reality. And the only way we change our perspective and reality is by challenging our beliefs and challenging our knowledge. So if I go into this and asking myself why I don't like Johnathan Van Ness, I may come up with a very good reason, like I believe I have, and still go, well, I still don't care for him as far as his personality. Mm-hmm. But again, as a person, I may like him very much.
Sure.
And it's very possible I would.
And for a lot of people, I'm sure that's hard to understand. Like, how could you not care for somebody but still appreciate them as a person, right?
Right.
But it's learning to look past your preferences and knowing the way to be.
Right. I can still know that he's still a good person.
Right.
Obviously by his actions that, you know, he's an advocate for HIV positive people, that he puts himself out there as an advocate, which is not, you know, necessarily the best place to be, because there are people even in the gay community who are so anti-HIV positive against people who have HIV, that he could get backlash from that. So it's not necessarily he's taken a popular stance.
Sure.
I don't think it's an unpopular stance, but it's not necessarily a popular one either. And yet he still has chosen to be an advocate for them.
He's a media warrior, and you
Right.
came at him, and you might have threw a punch that he would have perceived as a hit.
Yeah.
And he was just doing what he always does.
Except it wasn't. It was
Right,
just a little love tap.
But what we're going to find, like the more you dig into things and the more perspectives you take in and the more things you challenge, no one's ever right or wrong, right? Now, collectively some things could be agreed upon as just unacceptable or rude or that shouldn't be done. But every perspective has its merit, and just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean they're not important. We need all kinds to run this crazy ecosystem of people we have going on. So Johnathan has his place, and we do need him, and we do need showboaters to get things done. Activists kind of have to be in the limelight and have to fight for that because they're trying to get progress done. They want it to happen as fast as possible. Now we also need people who shy away from the limelight and who just like to work and focus, and they bring some clarity to situations that maybe someone like Johnathan couldn't. So just because he's not your cup of tea, some people out there are going to absolutely love him and identify with him. And just because you're not his cup of tea, just from what I've heard through his response for you, doesn't mean that some people aren't going to look at you first for some kind of direction.
And I think, and you make a very, very good point. And even while you're saying that, it made me realize is that I don't necessarily, because you're right, we do need people like Johnathan out there.
Absolutely.
However, I don't, now that you said it, I understand that it's important that we have people out there. Now, I may not care for his persona, but I think now that you said it, it's not even so much him as that person that he represents who is like that, but aren't doing the things that he's doing. Does that make sense? Like the very flamboyant person who's the scene queen, the person that has to have all the attention, but they're not out there, using that attention that they're getting for good things. It's all self-absorbed. And so maybe it's that I don't like. Maybe, but again, I wish he would have.
Right. So maybe it was you using a little bit of prejudice.
Right, exactly. But again, I think we could have accomplished so much with him here.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I know he thinks he because he's done a show on this, that he has all the answers, but he doesn't. Because if he had, he wouldn't automatically go to, oh, you have internalized homophobia. He would know that just by saying that, without
shut you down.
You're a hairdresser, you're not a psychologist, and that's not to take away from your talent. But for you to accuse somebody of something when you don't have any credentials or experience in the field of psychiatry or psychology to make a
assertion or
right,
diagnosis.
A diagnosis, thank you. A diagnosis to say someone has internalized homophobia just because they said they didn't like you is careless at the very least. And again, I just wish, because I was disappointed that he hadn't put the storyline up, only because I thought it was done, and what he did was disappointing because he did something I would never expect it, which is using a bully tactic, which was using deception and being disingenuous in that process. And, it's unfortunate. But again, I think he's, I don't know that he did, realizing what the reaction would be. I think he did because, I'm sure it's happened to him before.
Sure.
That if you put it out there, your fans are going to go and do exactly what you expect them to do. But with that said, again, I don't have any hard feelings towards Johnathan. I don't want anyone else to have hard feelings. I want them to praise him for the good work that he does and continues to do, and look at it from the different perspectives. I just want people to see that there are people like me out there who may not care for for that personality, but instead of just simply saying you have internalized homophobia, maybe you look at where they're really coming from and realize that's not the truth. And maybe you'll have a better chance of understanding where they're coming from. I'll say this. There's this movement going on where there are gay guys out there on these apps. And any person who says, that they are looking for a particular type of person, especially when it comes to race. You know, I'm only interested in white or Asian or whatever, and then people will go, "You're racist," and they will automatically say they're racist without knowing the first thing. This person could have a million black friends, and yet they would call them racist because they're not sexually attracted to black men, or they're not attracted to Asians, or they're not attracted to white men. And again, that's where that carelessness of just throwing words out there like that so carelessly, it makes it so that that word loses its power because you're just using it flippantly, and and I think there's a danger in doing that, because it's ridiculous to say, you know, I'll take, you know, me for instance. I'm not into older guys, but I'm not an ageist because I'm older. If I, you know, unless I hate myself, which I don't, regardless of what Jonathan says, I don't hate myself. So I know there's a little jab, sorry. I'm not into muscular guys, which I am, which, you know, again, you know, I'm just not into that. I'm not, you know, it's silly to sit there and start calling names because I know what I'm attracted to. I don't know why I'm attracted to what I am. I just know that I am.
Well,
and
that's
so,
like sitting there and telling someone that they can't have preferences, right?
Right, exactly. So if I say it there and I say, well, I'm not attracted to black men, it doesn't mean that I don't find black men attractive. It just means sexually I'm not attracted to them. It's just like me saying, well, I'm not attracted to women. So does that make me a misogynist? No, it makes me fucking gay. That's what it makes me. So to sit there and start calling names, so again,
well,
flippantly
remember
and carelessly.
for a long time, that response wasn't acceptable for you to say that you're gay.
Right.
Now, through a lot of work and painstaking petitioning, and we slowly come around to, no, it's okay that you're gay. And so we're looking into this other thing where, you know, if you don't like a certain race or you don't like a certain body type, it's kind of remnants of that. Like, you can't have that preference because everyone's too sensitive about it, right? You can't not like older people because they're just sweet older people. You shouldn't be so shallow. But when it comes to personal preference and especially sexuality, everything's so tailored. I mean, like, you can't kink shame. You can't default someone for having a certain sexual preference because that's just the way their biology works.
Right.
That's the way their brain works.
That's exactly right, and nor should you. It's like, you know, again, you know, you take young guys, twinks, if you will, who aren't into older guys, and older guys will attempt to shame them, going, "You're an ageist." They're not ageist. They just aren't into older guys. Why?
They're just not there.
Right. So you can't just call them a name because they're not, sexually attracted to you.
Sure.
And you may not like that, but it's a fact. And so get over it. Because guess what? There are plenty of young guys out there who do like older guys. There are plenty of white guys out there who do like black guys. So quit calling the names. Quit being so goddamn sensitive. And just, take responsibility for yourself and think positively and think about the solution rather than sit there and try to tear someone down because you want to force people to think your way. Because then you're just saying, oh well, to me, when we have these extreme people who do these things, when they are attempting to shut people down from being able to speak or think a certain way, you're doing the exact same thing that you used to hate when you were in the closet and you watched religion do that to you, calling you an abomination, calling you a sin, saying you should be stoned to death. And you were pissed that you didn't have a voice because those groups tried to keep your mouth shut. They kept you silent and they didn't ever want anyone to hear from you. And now you're doing the same exact thing to others. And it's hypocritical of you to do that. And you can try to justify it, but there is no justification for it. Because whenever we go to the other extreme where we go, well, you know what? Men have kept us down for, thousands of years. If women say men have kept us down for thousands of years. Whites have kept, black people down for thousands of years. If we say straight people have kept gay people down for thousands of years, this is probably all true. Mm-hmm. So but now that we have rights, now that we're able to, come out of the closet, if you will, and be who we are, we shouldn't be looking for retaliation. and say, well, because you did this to us, we're going to do this to you. That's not a justification. If we want to move forward, then we move forward equally. We don't sit there and attempt to have more benefits or more rights than straight people or religious people or black, white people or whatever, or men. All we need to do is move forward from this point, because when we start trying to retaliate, when we start justifying, that we have a right to act this way because you did it to us, then we're not going to move forward. We're not going to have progress.
It's assured mutual destruction, right?
Right, exactly. Because then, like people will sit there and laugh and say, "Oh, well, poor fragile white men," because white men are being kept out of the conversation. They're not allowed to speak on anything now. And the fact is they have a legitimate complaint that, look, we understand that white men have ruled the world for a couple thousand years now, or at least 1,000. And that they have, and that they've done wrong. So has every other fucking race. I don't give a fuck who you sit there and talk about, whether it's blacks, whether it's Asians, or whoever. They've all owned slaves. They've all done, wrongs against society, and committed atrocities and started wars and stuff. We've all done it. It's just that the white man's been in control lately. And I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but I just want to make sure that I emphasize that if we're going to move forward, we need to put the past behind us and move forward, and quit, bringing up the past to justify, our misdeeds or our bad behavior, to sit there and go, well, I can do this because it was done to me.
Well, I'm actually going to take that point and distill it to what I think is a little deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to scratch through that and say what we touched on earlier is when people start to feel uncomfortable, they look for something that's going to justify their discomfort. And I feel just like what you said when they say you can't dislike blacks because they're feeling uncomfortable and rejected, so their instant go-to is what they're taught, which is to throw it back in their face. And like we said earlier, clapbacks and what was the other topic you brought up, or other instance you brought up that was exactly like that? Anyway, really progress comes from being okay with rejection, being okay with any kind of negative emotion, and not trying to destroy the person who caused you to feel less than perfect.
Right.
But to work through it on your own and to grow from it and realize it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with who you are. This is just an opportunity. It's just work. Someone handed you work that you have to do, and you didn't really want to do it. But if you don't do that work, you're just not going to go anywhere.
Right. And you shouldn't expect to. But we shouldn't expect, again, one of the things I clearly remember back, several decades ago, that there were preachers who stood up at the pulpit and saying, "Look, if we give gay people rights, they're gonna demand all these other things." And the gay community, as a whole, collectively said, "No, all we want are equal rights." And now what we find is that there are gay people out there, and again, I know they don't speak for the majority of the gay community, but they're out there pressing things that are just not only wrong, they're illegal. Mm-hmm. They want to make religion accept them, and it's like, no, there's a separation of religion and religion and state, and there's a reason for that. Religious people, right or wrong, can believe however they want to. You and I may go, that's completely bullshit, but it's their right to believe that. If they want to discriminate in their church, they can discriminate in their church. Why would you want to be a part of a church that discriminates anyway? So when you have people saying, like religious schools, for instance, that, if you're gay or lesbian and you get fired because they find out that you're gay or lesbian, and you go, oh, well, they're just homophobes. Again, it's their religious belief, and it's their right to discriminate if they choose to. It is. And if you're part of it, you're accepting that bias. So I don't have any sympathy, and I don't believe we should make religion bow to our, because we think, being gay is okay. I don't think it's our right to force other people to have to say that or admit it. I don't need their approval. I just need them to stay out of my life and make sure that my rights aren't denied because of their belief.
Sure.
And yet that's exactly what these people in the gay community who are in the extreme groups are trying to do. They're trying to deny these people their rights. So they're doing exactly the same thing that they didn't like having done to them.
Well, it's never enough to feel like you're right.
Right, yeah.
It's never enough to just quietly be like, I'm right, they're wrong. You always have to do something. Or at least that's the status quo, is if someone disagrees with you, you have to do something to them. You have to level the field somehow. But we should really just be okay with, this is what I believe, and that's not what they believe, and to me, I'm right and they're wrong, and that's fine, and that's enough for me.
Right. I think once, I think once you've made your point and you lay down the facts, or what you believe are the facts or the truth, it's up to them to disseminate that. And if they still don't believe your way, well, that's their right to do so, and it's your right to believe the way you want. But to sit there and attempt to force people to do this, and again, this is another topic that we can talk about later
another
on,
time, sure.
at another time. But like when up in Canada, where they were trying to legislate speech, where people who were non-binary or whatever, saying that they wanted it made so that people had to refer to them by the pronouns that they choose, whether it's Z, G, or whatever. And that's how Jordan B. Peterson came into prominence, because he stood up and said, no, I'm not going to call you these made-up words because you tell me to. He said, if I want to because I respect you, that's one thing. But to legislate it, to say people have to say this,
right,
it's ludicrous. And he's right. It is ludicrous. No one should be able to demand that you speak a certain way. They just shouldn't. They shouldn't have that right, because then we no longer have freedom of speech. And then we have people on for transgender people. We have these extreme groups in the transgender community who don't speak for them, but yet are pushing this narrative, and anybody who stands up against them, they sit there and start name calling, right. With this whole discussion about whether or not men who became women should be able to participate in female sports. Mm-hmm. And they want to completely deny the advantages that these women have over, women who were born,
cis female.
Right, cis female. They want to completely deny the advantages they have. And Martina Navratilova, who's arguably probably the greatest woman tennis player of all time, she has been an LGBTQ advocate for decades. And she came out and said it's not fair. They do have an unfair advantage over cis women. And the extreme trans group went after her with their teeth out. Mm-hmm. Where they called her transphobe. It's
sure.
like,
all previous support from her
right,
completely washed up.
Exactly. And
because she made them feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And it was trendy to attack people who were saying stuff.
Right. And that's the danger of cancel culture is, and it needs to go away. And again, I don't give a damn. You can say I'm going to speak the truth regardless. And whether you like it or don't like it, I'm not going to, and I will promise you this. I promise you this. I will never apologize for speaking the truth. Mm-hmm. If I fuck up, I'll apologize for that. But if I'm speaking the truth, you're never going to, I don't care if it offended you or not. If the truth offends you, it's not me that you need to be mad at. You need to take a long look at yourself and what kind of person you are as to why the truth offends you. So,
well, that's why we have this podcast, Kurt, to find out what that truth actually
exactly is. Well, I have to tell you that I feel so much better. Because this probably happened a week or two ago.
It's been a while, and you've been stewing the whole
time. And it really has, because things don't normally bother me, but this would bother me because I felt like what he did was he portrayed me in a light that wasn't real, and it wasn't true, and I don't like that. I like being able to, I'm not someone who will cower away. I will sit there and tell you, who and what I am, and I won't back down from it. And if I had intended to be that way, I would sit there and go, "You're damn right. That's what I did, and I'm, and this is who I am, and this is how I am," and I'd own it. But it wasn't, and that's what bothered me, is because he
didn't give you room. to like talk.
Right.
It wasn't a conversation.
And he didn't. And he
It
did
was an accusation.
Right. And he did something that was childish. He put it out there for other people to participate in, which, you know, had he just kept it between him and I, we would never have had a podcast about this. But he chose to put it out there for, you know, to make himself feel better, I guess, because, you know, I guess I was the 100,000th person or 100,001.
You were the straw. You were
broke
the straw.
the camel's back, and he's like,
I
God
can't
damn
take it anymore. Everybody leave me alone.
Exactly. So, but I'm really glad that you did the show with me.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me.
And it's my pleasure. And I always love having you on here because, for those of you who might have noticed, Danny's no longer with us. He's moved on to greener pastures, and I was very fortunate that I found Eddie, and he's come in. He's picked up where Danny left off, and he's done an amazing job. And fingers crossed he'll be with us for quite some time because I definitely don't want to lose him. So,
well, thank you.
He's a great talent. So thank you for joining me. So guys, you can now find the Powers Project podcast on iTunes, on Google Play, and
soon to be Spotify.
So you just put in the Powers Project, and right now the icon is that of a rhino is on our logo, but that will be changing fairly soon.
We're gonna be listening to this a few episodes from now and being like, it was a rhino. That's what
Yeah,
it was.
exactly.
Oh, okay, I remember now.
So the new logo will have my ugly mug on there, and so, you know, but don't let that stop you from subscribing. And if you like the show, you know, rate me. And
and send us some emails, you know,
Yeah.
even in the comments on iTunes, you know, throw in a couple topics that you'd like for us to talk about. That'd be absolutely fantastic. And I'm a huge advocate for getting any listeners or anyone who's a fan involved.
Absolutely, because we love you.
Yeah.
So, all right, folks, that will do it for tonight. And everybody take care. Until next time, we'll see you then.
The Powers Project.